The Salem Witch Trials of 1692 stand as one of history's most infamous examples of a society driven by fear rather than reason. What began as a small group of girls exhibiting strange behavior quickly escalated into a full-scale witch hunt that led to the execution of 20 people and the imprisonment of many more. At the core of the hysteria was a Puritan society where fear of the unknown, religious extremism, and the need for public repentance overshadowed truth and justice. The trials were not merely about punishing witches. They were about maintaining control through fear and reinforcing the idea that redemption was only possible through confession, regardless of whether the accused were guilty or not. Fear was the foundation of the Salem Witch Trials. Puritan society was deeply religious and saw the world as a battlefield between God and Satan. The belief in the devil's presence was not metaphorical. It was an accepted reality that shaped everyday life. Any misfortune, from crop failures to illnesses, could be interpreted as the work of the devil. This created a society where fear was constantly lurking beneath the surface, waiting for a spark to ignite hysteria. That spark came in early 1692 when several young girls in Salem village began acting strangely, screaming, convulsing, and claiming to be tormented by unseen forces. With no scientific understanding of their condition, the symptoms were quickly attributed to witchcraft. Once the first accusations were made, fear spread like wildfire. People had once been neighbors and friends turned on each other, terrified that they might be the next target. The trials became a way to purge the community of evil, but in reality, they only deepened paranoia and distrust. What made this fear so powerful was its ability to override reason. The accused were often convicted based on spectral evidence, claims that a person's spirit had appeared in dreams or visions to harm others. There was no need for physical proof. An accusation was often enough to secure a conviction. In such an environment, innocents were meaningless. Once accused, the only way to avoid execution was to confess, even if the confession were false. One of the most striking aspects of the Salem trials was how confession, rather than evidence, determined a person's fate. Those who admitted to being witches and repented were often spared, while those who maintained their innocence were executed. This inverted the normal logic of justice. Truthfulness led to death, while lies led to survival. This system reflected the Puritan belief that repentance was the ultimate path to salvation. In their worldview, admitting one's sins, even falsely, was better than maintaining innocence, because it showed submission to God's authority. Its twisted moral logic meant that the trials were not about uncovering the truth, but about reinforcing religious dominance. The leaders of Salem were not interested in whether the accused were actually witches. They were more concerned with proving that their society was spiritually pure. Its emphasis on confession created a dangerous cycle. Once people saw that admitting to witchcraft could save them, some began falsely confessing to avoid execution. This in turn validated the existence of witches in the eyes of the court, fueling other accusations. The more people who confessed, the more the hysteria grew. Instead of questioning whether the trials were justified, the community saw each confession as proof that they were doing God's work. The trials revealed the dangers of a society that prioritizes fear and repentance over truth. By the time the hysteria died out in 1693, innocent lives had been destroyed. The trials had relied on unreliable evidence, coerced confessions, and mass hysteria rather than actual proof of wrongdoing. In the aftermath, some of those involved in the trials expressed regret. Judges and religious leaders admitted they had made mistakes, and in 1697, the Massachusetts court declared a day of fasting and repentance for the tragedy. However, for the family of those who had been executed, these apologies came too late. The damage had already been done. Salem's story serves as a warning about what happens when fear dictates justice. When a society values confession over truth and fear over reason, it creates an environment where people are willing to abandon logic in favor of self-preservation. The witch trials were not just about witches, they were about power, control, and a community so consumed by fear that it was willing to destroy itself to feel safe. Salem's legacy reminds us of the dangers of allowing fear-driven narratives to shape our decisions and the importance of standing by the truth, even when it is inconvenient or unpopular.